Thank you for tuning into the Debbie Devotional Podcast, a monthly show focusing on Debbie prospects, strategies, and incoming rookies. Now here's your host.
Welcome back to the Debbie Devotional, where we stay devoted to Debbie. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox86 on Twitter. But tonight we have a very special guest. We haven't done a guest in quite some time, but it's the off season. That's generally what we do: bring on some big names, some people that are probably a little smarter than us. And so we went ahead and stuck with that, and we brought on Travis May. At FF_Travis M on Twitter. And he is the lead college football analyst at Mojo, something that he can tell you about here in a little bit, and the host of the College to Canton podcast on the RotoViz feed. I am personally in a group chat with a very nerdy group chat with Travis, and he's gone into some detail about Mojo and everything that he's doing there. And it seems very, very cool. But first and foremost, how are you doing tonight, Travis?
Doing great. Just always glad to talk football. Get to do it all day and then all night. So that's good. Perfect. So yeah, it was nice to meet you guys, and can't wait to break down some of these incoming 2023 rookies and whatever else we want to throw in there.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to be doing that every year. Travis brings on or puts out a rookie poll mock draft, or whatever you want to call it, and rookie mock poll, I guess.
Very long hashtag.
Yes, that is definitely very true, and it's very interesting. And I thought it was very timely and a good time to bring him on so that we could cover all of that. Aaron, how are you doing tonight, buddy? I haven't said hi to you just yet.
Well, I'm doing well, John. Thank you. And happy to have you, Travis. Thanks again for coming on. I'm excited to talk about some football here.
Absolutely. All right. So like I said, Travis is with Mojo. Is it just Mojo? Is that what you call it? Or is it actually Mojo Markets?
I think on Twitter, it might be Mojo Markets. But yeah, it's just Mojo. It's funny. It's just, the idea is that, I don't know, like you don't want to lose your mojo in sports, right? Like, you found your mojo if you're, on a roll in sports. And so it's kind of wrapped around that, but I can get into Mojo here if you want me to now. I don't know how many people are even very familiar with it, but it's pretty new.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's not necessarily out to everyone just yet, or at least available to everyone just yet. But like I said, I don't know how much you're able to talk about or not or whatever. But in some of the group chats we've talked about, I've seen you talking about some pretty cool stuff that they have planned, whether it's actually implemented yet or not. But just tell us a little bit about Mojo, and maybe some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, sure. So it's like the first fully regulated sports stock market. And so right now you can trade in New Jersey. So you can make an account wherever and just be present physically in New Jersey, and you can trade actual players based on their real life NFL production. And so it's been really fun to see people engage with that, and real life value being tied to on-field production. It's not just fantasy points. There's actual, we have our formula posted. You can see what goes into the Mojo value that actually goes into pricing a player. So it's a lot of fun. And I get to oversee the college portion of things and help through, the transition from college to the NFL. So we're about to release some Senior Bowl players this week, adding some running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends who are at the Senior Bowl. And then we'll be adding a bunch of the big names like Bijan Robinson and Jordan Addison and Michael Mayer of Notre Dame, tight end there, here very soon. And so it's just, we get to try to map out these players' career and then see people actually invest and buy in, or you can actually go long or short, just like you could a real stock. So you can kind of bet against a player's future on the NFL side, or you could invest in their future and believe that they're going to exceed their current price. And so it's been really fun to just see real market action and see how that differs from the fantasy space.
Yeah. And well, I guess I'll follow that up because it's a really cool concept. And a lot of us who are playing Devi or C2C leagues, whatever the case is, we are kind of treating these players like stocks of sorts when we're investing in them, seeing and hopefully expecting some sort of rise in value for our own fantasy teams. But how has Mojo changed or helped you as far as your prospect evaluations go?
Yeah, I think one thing that Mojo does really well is every single player. You can click on whatever player that you can see their price, what they've done in the past day or whatever as the primary page. But when you go in and just click on, let's say Brock Purdy, you can see the exact dollar amount of Mojo value that he has accrued and in fact banked already. Like that's built into his price. No matter what, he's already done that. It's on the field. Like he's around already in just 1 year accrued about $3 worth of his stats. But then there's also another part of the bar that you can view within the app that shows, hey, this is his projected future value, and that is I can't really get into the nitty gritty of all that, but it's a fancy modeling way of projecting out the rest of his career and implied possible statistics. And so, if you believe that we are wrong in valuing the rest of his career and evaluating where he's going to end up for his career bet, essentially, you can say, okay, well, I'm actually, I don't think he's actually going to be the starter next year. So I'm going to bet against him. I'm going to, here very soon, I mean, if you just wanted to hop on there right now, you could go short on him and even get a little bit of a multiplier help, which it's fun. Like let's say his price, went down 5%, but you had a 3 times multiplier on him and you shorted him. That 3 times multiplier at 5% is actually a 15% profit for you. And just the other way around, like if you just went up 5% and you had a 3x multiplier and you went long on him, bet with him, you can get 15%. And those multipliers make it a lot of fun because some guys who have less volatile stocks like a Tom Brady, like he's not going to have 15 more years of production unless. Well, I mean, maybe I never want to say it's impossible with Tom Brady, but he's not going to.
Never say never.
He doesn't have a ton of future value necessarily. And so there's most of his value of like $175 or so, like 160 plus is already baked in, So, but to make players like that more fun, Mojo offers greater multipliers for those less volatile players, which is pretty cool. Just being able to successfully, map the implied risk and just make it fair and equitable for both us as the provider of the service and users, and just kind of mapping these futures.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Now I know you guys are only in New Jersey as of right now, correct?
Yeah, but we are on our way to I think another like dozen or so states that we're in process with, and I think more than anything, we just want to make sure we can add all the rest of the sports, not all the rest of the sports, but a few more sports and get those right, so that we can properly scale that and do that well wherever we go. We're very close to the NBA product. And so that's going to be in the very, very near future. And then shortly after that, we're going to launch some baseball for Major League Baseball, and we'll include a bunch of futures on even players that are in the minor leagues, which is going to be a lot of fun. I nerd out about that stuff. I love fantasy baseball too. So that's going to be coming too. So it's not just college football. It's not just NFL. It's going to be NBA, Major League Baseball, some college basketball in there. So I can't wait to see what happens with it and how that scales and grows. And once we're in several more states, man, it's just it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It sounds like it. Now, you and I, Travis, get very nerdy with it. Aaron, not so much, but he's trying. He's working on it. I know just from talking to you in the group chats that like you are very excited about what's going on in the background at Mojo with some of the machine learning and things of that nature. I don't want to divulge too much. I don't know what you're allowed to divulge, but you've always been big on certain metrics and things like that you're looking for. You've talked about on your pod, College to Canton, that talking about like recruit status and things of that nature, like that you're looking at. But what is new coming from Mojo, like whether it's a new metric you guys have created or just something that you've never really looked at, that you're excited about applying to like future classes or learning more about at the very least?
Yeah, I think it's just really that idea of looking at a player through a lens that specifically and like hardline looks, it says, hey, this is what the player has done. Yes. But this is the exact amount of stats that we expect out of this player for the rest of the career. And taking that idea and applying it to every single player changes how I prioritize who I draft. Because like, let's say a Bijan Robinson comes in this year, he doesn't have any accrued value, but his future expected value is probably higher than almost every other running back in the NFL, or maybe it is already higher than every other NFL running back this year, depending on how confident you are in Bijan Robinson. So if you look through things, look at things through a lens of like, hey, look, I know he's done this, and that's great, and I'm confident that he can repeat some version of what he's already done. But how much do I really care when it comes to that certainty versus the actual expected future value? Because I think that's where the fantasy community gets in trouble, because we love, more sure things at certain positions, and we get caught up in the cachet or the brand, as it were, when it comes to certain players, and are overconfident in the duration at which they can keep it up. Now, I will say, certain positions like wide receiver, the good receivers just keep repeating those results. Like we see that time and time again. But I also think, conversely, we undervalue running backs because we think that there's this magical age cliff, when in all reality, 5 of the top 10 rushers this year were 27 years or older. And so I think understanding how the typical running back career, every player career is mapped out with all the data that I have at my fingertips now, and understanding the exact probabilities of expected value in each year that remains for a player's career, that revolutionizes how I value players.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know Peter Howard has done some great work, and he was kind of all over it this year, talking about how it was going to be a down year in fantasy, but also like the 27-year-old running backs were going to be so important. And like you said, I mean, they were, and it was big. It was people. I don't want to group everyone together or anything like that, but a lot of people have been talking about how, running backs don't matter, all that kind of stuff. Running backs aren't as important, go zero RB, all that kind of stuff. But I also wonder if it's just the time, the time period that we're in right now. And, and it's always fluctuating and looping back. And, in 2-3 years, it's probably going to be the complete opposite, or very well could be. Maybe not probably, but, very well could be. And so I always try to tell the listeners, like, don't get too caught up in what worked this year. You can pick up on trends, you can do what's smart and all that kind of stuff. But when you're talking about zero RB, it's because we don't have a lot of young RBs that are viable right now. But this upcoming draft class that we'll get into here in a little bit has a lot of them. And,
right.
That could change this season, this 2023 season. And then next year, everyone's like, you have to go 3 RBs or else you're not.
Yeah, we always overcorrect, don't we? So,
of course,
that's a problem. But it's just funny how we kind of look at a narrow window of history and then come to some conclusion as a community that, oh, this is the new reality. When in all reality, there was just a brief window at which we saw running backs' careers end earlier than we had just seen them do in the previous 10 years, and thought, oh crap, we have to completely adjust, and we have to lean hard into zero RB, and we have to lean hard into mapping these careers as like ending when they're 26. But really what it was is 2013 sucked for the most part, with the exception of like Le'Veon Bell. 2014, not good. Rest in peace, Bishop Sankey. 15 was pretty good. 16 had like 2 options. That was Ezekiel Elliott and Derrick Henry. Everyone else died. And so it's just like we saw this 3 out of 4 year window of like all these running backs just wasting away before they even got to the prime of their career. And then we saw guys like a few other exceptions like Todd Gurley have, just odd kind of not super common career ending type stuff to his knees. And then we thought, oh crap, that position's over now. We, only invest in one direction. And I think we just need to kind of look at the greater like long-term picture, and how do I predict the future of where the next few draft classes are going to land? Like, am I expecting this trend to continue, or could it actually correct the other direction? Kind of like what you were saying, John.
Yeah, and I liked some of the points that you were bringing up with class specifics and what players were in those classes. So, for example, 2017, well, of course, with that much top end talent, and those talents are going to last longer,
Yeah.
theoretically, into their careers versus the guys who just burn out early due to injury or just due to the fact that they were never actually that great. So it does make you excited, I guess, for the incoming guys this year that there's a bunch of talent out there. I don't know what your thoughts are, and I guess we'll talk about that shortly here about this class in particular compared to even future years. And yeah, maybe we want to start breaking some of that stuff down.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go. Let's do it.
All right. So, you've been doing this rookie mock poll. What's the actual hashtag? Because, like you said, it's a pretty long one.
When I first started it, I was still doing like the Fantasy Authority, writing for them, and so it was like TFA rookie mock or something. I had to like look it up, and I had to like find out what was I calling this thing back in 2016 or something. But eventually, I was like, I have to standardize this just because I'm going to forget every year what I call this thing. So it's just the year and then rookie poll mock. So like this year, it is 2023 rookie poll mock, the hashtag. So you can find all of the polls that are associated with that mock draft under that 2023 rookie poll mock. And so you can do that for 2022, 2021, 2020. I think 2017, I made it weird. 2016 was weird. But after that, I think I standardized it, got smart about it. And I was like, hey, if I'm going to do this, let's be able to actually look it up next time. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you've been doing it for what, 7 years now?
Yeah, I guess this is 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. It's 8 years. 8th year.
8 years.
So,
Wow. Yeah.
man, that's weird. But yeah, been doing that for a while and been doing some written and pod content since 2015. So yeah.
What was I'm guessing I know the answer, but what was the original goal of making these polls? And also a secondary question there that just popped in my head. Do you feel like Twitter has gotten more, less, like viable for the polls, the same, or somewhere in between?
I think it's been funny to actually see. You can look at the results yourself if you get curious
Sure.
and just like through the different hashtags. But over the years, the collective community has gotten a lot better at predicting future draft capital and doing it really early for the most part. Last year was an exception at the quarterback position because, well, everyone for the most part whiffed on the number of early round quarterbacks that there would be. Like we understood it was, a quote unquote weaker class even coming in, but we thought, the NFL is going to reach anyway. They always do. And so the implied capital that we were, assuming was in play last January made for some odd looking quarterback selections in the mock. But for the most part, every other position, go you, all of you, every single one of you, you're good. Figuring things out.
Hey,
Wisdom of
that's
the
good to
crowd.
hear. So what was the goal when you first started it out? Was it just trying to pick people's brains, or was there more to it?
When I first started it back in like 2016, I was like, man, we're not even back. I say back then, way back in 2016, there were just not a whole lot of resources that I felt could help gather a true consensus. There's a lot of noise, a lot of people arguing, but like, why don't we just ask everyone, hey, what do you think? Like these 4 players, who would you take here? And find an actual true consensus when all the other, for the most part, really viable options at that given rookie draft pick slot were available. And so that's what it's kind of gleaned pretty well over the years just to find, hey, that actually is probably what the market consensus is, at least in this moment, at least in these few weeks right now.
Absolutely. So has there been anything, like more than just, where the consensus has them? Has there been any other information that you've been able to glean from, from doing these polls over the years?
Yeah, I can speak to the depth and breadth of a class in general, and where there might be some value in terms of like perception of the class being really deep at running back that pushes down some wide receiver value. That might have actually helped, me change where I could try to position myself in rookie drafts once the order is actually kind of set. I might try to position myself differently or even move out of a class entirely, depending on where I am, depending on where I think the class is going to go. It's a little bit early to, make that decision in January because a lot of things can change, but especially the immediate like post-draft version of it. I always do one in January and then one immediately following the draft. And it's funny how really crazy accurate the post-draft version is, and both capturing consensus and even finding like just being smart about not reaching just as a community, which is it's been really accurate in the post-draft.
It's interesting to hear about the accuracy of it. And that was actually one follow-up question I was going to add to John's question about things that you can glean from doing this poll on Twitter. Do you find that Twitter is just bad at, let's say, evaluating a single position, for example, like quarterbacks or, running backs, things like that? And we can talk pre-draft, since right now we're in the pre-draft period. And obviously you just did this poll that's pre-draft, so we can stick with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it used to be really bad at wide receiver because it was mainly a bunch of people who loved the highlights. And for too long, they were prioritizing bigger bodied wide receivers that didn't create separation or have decent analytical profiles. But I think collectively, the community is just kind of coming around and accepting that not all wide receivers are going to look like they did, in the Andre Johnson era, So really, it's been cool to see the development. I guess the process clearly change for the community, but so they're not as bad anymore. But I think they are a little bit overreactive to capital. But with random players, they're a bit stubborn with it too. Like there's always one that's like that'll get drafted really highly, and the community's like, nah, I'm gonna pass. And it's funny, most of the time, I'm like, good on you guys. We didn't really, fold and just say that was a good player all of a sudden because he had capital. Like this year it was Tyrion Davis-Price, LSU guy going to 49ers. Obviously, he should have fallen in rookie drafts, and he did left and right all over, despite him getting the day 2 capital. Who were a couple examples like Van Jefferson. He came in the league like 47 years old, and so the community actually rightly, faded him for the most part, given his second round capital. This year, Velus Jones was going crazy late. Good on you guys. He didn't do anything until year 6 or whatever. Let's probably realize that's not going to be a hit. And so I think the community has even gotten decent collectively at not overreacting to reaches by NFL teams.
It's a good point. And honestly, I like how you laid out wide receiver and how we've come a long ways with that. Now, quarterback, we can talk about this year's poll. I think the guys at the top make a lot of sense, right? Bryce Young going at 102, CJ Stroud 103, but then you start getting these guys in the later first, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. And I know quarterback, John has talked about some ways that we can improve our hit rates at quarterback, but it seems like sometimes these votes, I don't know if I want to say get out of hand. Sometimes the hype for these guys who they flash a big arm, or some of the NFL talking heads I'm not going to call guys at ESPN or, whatever sources, but they're kind of touting these guys who really don't have very good profiles other than maybe a couple of key traits or whatever. So does quarterback still seem like that's the least accurate that we are at predicting these prospects?
Yes, absolutely. And that's mainly because I don't know if it's not really not the fantasy community. It's like everyone that follows football in a way, just has kind of resigns to the fact that like, oh, no one really knows. Like we can be so sure about whatever, but nobody really knows with quarterbacks. So just go with the draft capital, whatever. But truthfully, the league has gotten a lot better at draft capital investment in recent years, and actually targeting players who are proven both through the eye test that everyone has relied on for so long, but also on paper. Hey, I think they're accurate, but do the numbers actually say they're accurate? Like are they? Like I think that they can be an efficient passer, but are they actually an efficient passer? Like what have they actually done to build out a profile that says, hey, this guy hits and this guy doesn't? And it's amazing it took him that long, but over in like the last 6 or 7 years, the league has gotten a lot better. And hey, maybe we should have some kind of analytical process when it comes to QB analysis, rather than like taking Christian Ponder in the first round. But yeah, I think the NFL has gotten better, but the community has gotten better. But at the same time, they just fold as soon as capital happens. They're like, oh yeah, Zach Wilson QB2. Not all people, but like it's just like Zach Wilson was. I remember even like in December of like the draft before he got to the league, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, it's Trevor Lawrence," and then obviously Zach Wilson. I'm like, bro, it's either Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, and then way down the line, QB5-ish maybe is Zach Wilson. And lo and behold, hey, what happened? Yeah. And it's not like I have some magical skeleton key that has all the answers. Nobody does. But there is always one in every class that you can pretty much fade, even when there is capital. And so I don't know. I think we've gotten better as an analytics community at finding and adjusting for the right things. And based on conversations I've had with a few analytics minds, like on NFL teams, that we're kind of like solving for at least a proxy version of what they're looking at too. It's not the same, but it's it cleans up the data in a way that you know that I guess kind of adjusts for things that NFL teams are looking for too.
Yeah, we're looking for obviously fantasy points, but fantasy points generally come from the better QBs. So yeah, that's
Right. Yeah.
that's the general speaking, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you can solve
Now,
for draft capital, solve for fantasy points a little bit, then yeah, that's going to be a good thing.
exactly. Now, do you feel? I know you get into kind of percentiles with QB analysis and everything.
Mhm.
At least from what I've gleaned from conversations with you, is that a Mojo thing, or is that have you always kind of broken players down into percentiles like that, or at least the QBs like that?
That was what I normally talk about. When I normally talk about quarterbacks, it's like through the metric that I created for RotoViz, like I guess 3 years ago, called scheme adjusted pass efficiency, and that does a great job of cleaning up a player's efficiency profile and adjusting for things that artificially inflate a quarterback's numbers in college, and so when you mix that with rushing numbers, you can get a really accurate picture of who's going to get drafted, and who's not, and who might but shouldn't.
Yeah, that's awesome. That I was just wondering if with those percentiles and everything, and kind of guesstimating or projecting what uh, draft capital might be for a player. Do you think that the NFL kind of overcorrected last year with the QBs? Because you said that they're getting better about it, but I also feel like maybe they missed a little bit with Matt Corral, Sam Howell, some of these players that you don't have to say that they're the best QBs that have ever been in the NFL draft, but I feel like they were better than third and fifth round draft picks at the same time. Do you feel the same way, or do you think, like I said, do you think that they kind of overcorrected?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Even with like Brock Purdy, he was obviously underdrafted. It's easy to say in hindsight, but at the same time, like the Debbie community was like, "Hey, this guy might be a first round talent," like 3 years ago, and so we weren't surprised. Like, oh yeah, Brock Purdy, yeah, that makes sense. He peaked at like 94th percentile pass efficiency profile and accounted for like 22%, I think, 1 year of Iowa State's rushing yards, which is like, okay, check and check. Yes, he should hit if he's given an opportunity. And he wasn't like perfect because he's not the obvious traits guy. But yeah, there are certain profiles that they clearly, I don't know if they're undervalued or maybe they were just not sure what to do with the COVID years and stuff. Like how valid was 2020? I'm not sure how those conversations went. Like when they're comparing profiles that are vastly different in size and quality. And matchups are coming together like on a Wednesday and played on Saturday, like that BYU Coastal Carolina game back in like what was that 2020? Like it's just a weird season, and so some of these players had odd blips in their profiles that looked incredible or looked terrible, and didn't look like the rest of their career. So it was just an odd group of players to analyze in general. But the peaks of all the passers said, hey, yeah, Howell should have gone way earlier than he did, and Corral should have gone way earlier than he did. Willis actually profiled like a day 2 guy, so like okay, that's fine. But yeah, and Pickett, maybe he was a Jag for like 4 years and had a 190th percentile plus profile. Maybe we shouldn't overreact to that. But the Steelers don't care. They're like, yeah, we're going to draft him, and then Chris Alucon, an FCS guy, and then he is not even on the roster. Like the Steelers clearly don't care about analytics, and that's eventually going to hurt them. But in terms of draft capital and player analysis, they do not value that yet. So it's just funny to see like what teams do or don't care. But yeah, overall undervalued as a class.
I agree. Toronto Dave's in the chat. He's saying how much to weigh rookie profile versus draft capital is always tough for me. He's taking it case by case now. I wonder, would you lean more? It sounds like I know the answer, but would you lean more your analysis or draft capital when it's all said and done for these QB prospects?
I mean, draft capital is always going to be the best indicator of future success as an independent variable, but you can also use all of NFL history as a guide, and really where like I like to break it up. And it makes sense to do this like with eras and trends of how teams are investing in capital, how efficient they were in different eras in investing in capital, and to find trends, recent ones that might indicate the league is changing how they view a particular position's analysis, and which is what sparked my interest with quarterback, because I was like, holy cow, they're actually, am I crazy? Or are they actually making more numbers based decisions? And so I think it is more of a case by case basis, but there's always historic precedent that can lead us to the right decision more often than not. But sadly, you're going to miss on a Josh Allen if you go with historic precedent, and if you go with, what actually makes sense. So that hurts. But most of the time, you're going to find a Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, but it's not like Josh Allen was Josh Allen year one. You didn't miss out on much in year one. You might be able to pick up on some things. I think that's always the thing that I try to harp on with my ranks and my model is, I'm not saying if I put a guy at wide receiver 8 that he can't be good. It's that I don't think he's going to be good right now, or like I don't think he's going to be amazing right now. And it's going to take some time. And the same thing with the QBs and all that. It doesn't mean that they can't be. Now, Josh Allen's just an outlier, in my opinion, and we should never try to comp anyone to him. But there's definitely other players, that maybe you've missed on via, looking at analytics or whatever. But a lot of times it's because they took time. And that's not necessarily missing, in my opinion. That's just more, everyone missed, if that's the case. Or if they were all in on them, they were wrong because, they were all in on them and then they didn't do anything for 2 years and vice versa. And I'm not trying to say like, oh, you got to be right all the time or anything. But I just think that there's definitely profiles that are going to hit much more often than others, and that's what we should probably be leaning towards more than just, hey, this guy got first round draft capital, so I'm going to go ahead and draft him at 105. But speaking of 105, why don't we go ahead and dive into this year's poll and see what see what happened, because like you said, it's getting a lot better each year. The consensus is getting smarter, and let's see how this first round went ahead and hit. Aaron, do you have the poll in front of you? You want to cover the first round, and then we can kind of dive in and do a little bit of analysis?
Sure, I'd be happy to cover at least the first 6 tiers as they're broken down there. Bijan Robinson, tier 1, RB1, makes sense, right? Then tier 2, it was Bryce Young, 102, and tier 3 at 103, CJ Stroud. So a couple of quarterbacks after Bijan. Then we started to get into some of those skill position guys. So 104, Jahmyr Gibbs. 105, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Then a little bit of a tier break for Quentin Johnston, wide receiver, at 106. And another wide receiver at 107, Jordan Addison. And then we also get to this tier 6 where there was 108, Anthony Richardson, quarterback. And then 109, Will Levis, quarterback. So what sticks out to you guys based on those first 9 selections?
Honestly, I feel like Travis was right. It started out pretty hot. It started out pretty accurate. I'm a known Quentin Johnston. I don't want to say hater because I'm not, but like a disapprover. I don't know. Is that a word? But at the same time, I don't think it's egregious to have him at 106. I would definitely not have him there, but I don't think it gets kind of wild until the tier 6. So it seems pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the results and everything. Travis, what do you feel about that? And then also, why don't you go into a little bit of detail about how you made the tiers? I'm sure it's a
Yeah.
pretty simple process based on what I'm looking at, but yeah, why don't you get into that as well?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like, and altogether, like with this, the poll, there were like 12,000 plus votes on this thing. So there's a bunch of solid samples going into each pick. So, like, at every pick, I have 4 different options because Twitter limits me to 4. And so, like, obviously, Bijan ran away with it, took like almost 75% of the vote for the first pick. But a tier break is essentially, it's simple. It's 20% or more victory margin. So if you have 75% of the vote, you're obviously no one's gonna get within 20% of that. But I saw a few other players like it. We saw like 1, 2, 3 be in their own separate tier. Like it seems like there's definitive consensus. That's not the case every year. We often do see like one player kind of in their own tier, or maybe 2 players up in that top tier year over year. But this year, there seems to be a pretty clear consensus among the fantasy community that it's 1 Bijan, 2 Bryce, 3 CJ Stroud, and then from there, I mean, it's again, maybe overly confident, putting Jahmyr Gibbs and Jackson Smith-Njigba in their own tier. I felt it was a bit strong, but I mean, like once it got down to the 1.05 poll for Jackson Smith-Njigba, he took down 2/3 of the poll by himself, and that was with Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison also being up for vote. I was kind of surprised that there was that much confidence, and that no one even had, was within 50% of the vote with him. So that was interesting. But yeah, Quentin Johnston. I mean, like I think the community is pretty firm on there being 3 clear wide receivers that they trust more than others overall. And so Jackson Smith-Njigba, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, whatever order you want to put them in. I could have felt like the consensus is around there, but I wasn't surprised. Like you mentioned that you don't like Anthony Richardson necessarily, or Will Levis. I think especially Will Levis as like safe fantasy projections. But yeah, I think like once you get beyond this for like a QB3 or QB4 in Superflex drafts, most years somebody's going to start reaching in this range. So regardless of the quality of player, so it felt like okay, yeah, this is. Even though it's earlier than I might take them, yeah, this feels about right for QB3 or 4 in most years.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I always in my head want these polls and everything to be perfect, but your average rookie draft isn't going to be perfect. And so this is probably more of what you should expect and what you can expect, which is probably what your main goal was, to find what you can and should expect. And so that's why it's important to look at this stuff, especially, and we know things will change because there's still the combine, there's still the draft, there's still Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl and everything else. Like we know things will change, but it's great to figure this stuff out because I don't know about you, but I have a couple of startups coming up here soon, and we have rookies in the draft and all that kind of stuff. So, I love that, we can figure this stuff out now because you might love a player. Like I love me some Josh Downs, but I've kind of learned from this poll, we can get into where he went, but he's going a lot later than probably where I would pick him. So I don't have to pick him at like a 107 or something like that. And that's great. And not to deviate too much, but Toronto Dave's also in the chat again with what's your guys' take on Stroud's rushing profile, small but present. We obviously saw what he did with the Georgia game where he finally ran. I mean, it was like he never did, whether they told him not to or whatever, and then they finally told him in this game, like, hey, you do whatever it takes to win. But a lot of people have even gone as far as saying like that's the game when they figured out that CJ Stroud is their favorite QB in this class and things like that. Do you believe? I mean, I guess you have to believe that he has some kind of rushing profile. I mean, he kind of proved it in that game, whether it's like actually his game or not, but he definitely has the athleticism to do it. Do you feel like it could be something he could utilize in the NFL, or do you think it was more just like I said, a necessity of that game, a necessity of college football, that kind of thing?
I think he's going to have to at the next level. And it is funny because he's just odd about it. Like there's no reason sometimes he doesn't run. He prefers to pass, and he doesn't want to take extra hits. And maybe it was just smart enough to realize that, hey, I'm Ohio State's starting quarterback, and I'm really freaking good. If I just stay healthy, I'm gonna make millions of dollars. Maybe I shouldn't go put my neck on the line just yet. Maybe I'll actually save that and do that in the next level. And also Ryan Day has been vocal about, hey, we don't actually like to put our quarterbacks in harm's way and really over rush them. That was really the case of Fields, although Fields did run more than Stroud. He didn't run like, hey, yeah, Fields is obviously going to rush for 1,100 yards once he gets to the Bears. Like, like there wasn't that kind of rushing profile with him. So yeah, we could see a major uptick for Stroud. And I think some people forget maybe that his first college touch was a 48-yard rushing touchdown. Like his only touch, I think, that season was a 48-yard rushing touchdown. Yeah, he can definitely do it. I get concerned when players are actually at a negative rushing total for any season, or like more than one season, or for their career, like in their peak passing season, typically. Like it's a big red flag if they can't get at least above 0. So yeah, Stroud had 1 year where I was below that, but this year it was clearly not. And so yeah, I mean, like we look at historic numbers in terms of how teams have moved to more mobile draft capital investment at the quarterback position. Like there's been, I'm pretty sure I think that's still the case, one first round quarterback that actually had negative rushing yards in their peak passing season. Can you guess who that player is?
First round
quarterback since like 2016, I think is the mark.
Ooh,
2017 on. Only one first round quarterback that's had negative rushing yards in their peak passing season.
Oh man, I'm so bad at this. I'm just completely blanking right now.
He was a complete bust, if that helps.
Oh, Josh Rosen?
Josh Rosen.
Oh,
yes. So yeah, Josh Rosen is the only first round quarterback to have like negative rushing yards. And that, of course, I'm not sure all listeners are privy to this detail, but like college stats actually mark the stack yardage against quarterbacks' rushing totals. So that's how you get negative rushing yards. And so it can really point out when a quarterback is a huge liability in avoiding sacks. Like this year's Tanner McKee. So don't draft him no matter what. Like you can just take him off your board. 7th round rookie draft. Don't even touch him. I don't care what his capital is. He's bad.
I keep seeing them in like the 3rd and 4th rounds of these rookie mocks and stuff for people. And I'm like, what are we doing here, people? Yeah. But I honestly thought you were asking a trick question. I was thinking of good QBs that might have had negative yardage. So I'm like sitting there thinking of all these, and then you said, "Oh, he's a bust." I'm like, "Oh, it's Josh Rosen."
It's obviously Josh.
Yeah, we're thinking like Dwayne Haskins with the Ohio State.
Yeah. Honestly,
he was like right at like 0.51% or something silly. He was like right above the minimum threshold. He and Mac Jones, man, it's like you're almost immobile enough that you're terrible, but yeah. And so there is a lot of signal there to be gleaned in predicting future outcomes. Like if you can just rush, you're probably going to get more opportunities to pass, even too. Also, like now because teams want that threat, they want at least, you don't have to be a Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or Justin Fields, but you have to at least, like when you hold the ball in the running back's hand, like the pocket, like if the linebacker like wafts, he like wafts at you because like you're not keeping this. What are you doing? Like that's a problem. And so yeah,
like Daniel Jones probably wouldn't have a job right now if he didn't have the rushing. I honestly believe that to be true.
Seriously, and it's funny, like the players that hit with trash passing analytical profiles are guys like that. They're all guys that had at least one season of 15% or more of their team's rushing yards. Like Daniel Jones actually had bonkers numbers in terms of like a percentile of Duke's rushing yards as a quarterback there. Josh Allen had like over 20% at his peak, I think, of Wyoming's rushing yards. And so it was clear like, hey, these guys have really wild playmaking ability with their legs. If they can figure it out as a passer too, man, like that's fun. And that's really fun with Josh. And it was kind of fun for a second. But this year, like with Daniel Jones, it's like he might not be terrible this year. So I don't know. It can make up for a lot.
Mostly against my Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that. But
No, you're good. But Travis, you have fueled these people who are just truthers for Anthony Richardson and Will Levis for maybe seasons to come. As far as the hope with some mobility, they have a shot, right? They have a shot to sustain value. I mean,
yeah,
I guess we'll see with the draft season.
yeah.
See
Will
where they
Levis
land.
doesn't though. Let's be real. But but yeah, Anthony Richardson is as an alien. So I mean, yeah, anything could happen with him. I have no idea.
Yeah, but at the same time, in this class, I think that all three of us believe that Anthony Richardson and Will Levis are both being drafted too high in this mock. Or at least I don't want to put words in your mouth. I believe that. I'm pretty sure Aaron believes that as well. I where would you feel comfortable in this draft? Because I also think that people are like, oh well, they have to be in the first round because they're QBs and they're going to be drafted in the first round. They're going to get first round draft capital, all that kind of stuff. But I don't, whereas maybe you could have made that argument last year. When we start looking, when we get into tier 7 and beyond in this poll, I think we might still see some names that I would much rather have even over a first round draft capital QB.
Yeah, and that's what's tough. Like you're betting against history when you're betting against the first round quarterback, but you're also part of history is the analytical profile of the player as a passer and a rusher. And Richardson has he's crazy upside as a runner. Yes, there's no debate, but it will be funny when he does get the first round capital because he will. I'm not sure there's actually ever been a worse passer in the history of the NFL draft to go first round that's had a worse profile than Anthony Richardson. I can't find one.
It's so bad.
It's really just it's a dumpster fire. Like if you squint, it's still on fire. Like it's still obviously on fire. You actually can feel the heat on your face. It's so like just awful. And so yeah, I mean, like he makes some awesome throws, and then the next throw he'll throw it in the dirt. And and so NFL coaching staff's like, well, I could just fix his footwork and where his hips are facing, and that's going to solve it. And cool, good luck. You better have Brian Dable.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I live in Florida. I'm a Florida Gator fan. Been all my life, and I went into this year knowing that they were going to be terrible because Anthony Richardson was their QB and no one believed me. And so it's just like, guys, I kind of do this, with all of my spare time. And I cannot guarantee you that he will be terrible, but I'm promising you he will be terrible.
Yeah. The upside was immense. Preseason,
Sure.
I think I was quoted in print and in audio as saying, look, if any quarterback is going to pass them, it's in terms of like draft capital, it should be Anthony Richardson because he's an alien. But no one else should be in the conversation. But he just didn't do it. Like he didn't actually prove that he could be an efficient passer.
Exactly. You got to take that step forward to be a first round pick. I'm not saying that, obviously we can get into, like I said, tier 7 and beyond here. I'm not saying you shouldn't draft them at any point. Like there's a point where upside becomes more important than college production or whatever. It's just not at 108, 109 for me in this draft class because there's so many good running backs in this class. And, like we were talking about before, like this could change. This could be the new 2017 that changes the whole, scenario in fantasy drafts and, in fantasy rankings, all that kind of stuff. I don't know about you. I made an emphasis to focus on like my startup rankings or at least my combined rankings for Dynasty this year. And so whereas I used to have like A, B, C, D, and all these grades, and I would just have like these are the A running backs, these are the A wide receivers, so on and so forth. I changed to now I have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, whatever. I don't have a tier 1 and tier 2 running back right now. I would have if Breece Hall had stayed healthy, but he got hurt. And so I don't have a tier 1. I have a tier 3 is the beginning of my running back, grades. And so I think that just shows you that how the class is right now, or how the position is right now. that could easily change once we get these 20 and 21-year-old players come in, and they're all studs, or a lot of them are studs at the very least. And all of a sudden we have a couple tier 1, maybe, like 5 tier 2, all that kind of stuff. And next thing you know, like I said before, everyone's going to be like, oh, we got to draft these running backs. Screw these wide receivers.
Yeah, and it's fun. Like, we've got a bunch of good running backs who are also very young. So I love me some 21-year-old rookie running backs that get capital. Those guys hit quite a bit. Like even guys that might not go super early, like Israel Vandekanda. He didn't even, I don't even remember where he went in this draft, but or at all. But like, he's going to be 20 most of his rookie year. So there's some young, intriguing guys. Like Gibbs is still 20. Like, he doesn't turn 21 till March. Like, Bijan's going to be 21 for his entire rookie season. So it's a really young class, very talented class that should have some decent runway here.
I agree. Aaron, you didn't talk too much about this tier 1 through 6. Do you have anybody that truly stands out? Do you have any qualms with it?
No. And I know you commented on the Quentin Johnston selection, but I'm also counter it. Who there is like strongly ahead of him? Like, you can make suggestions for other guys that could slot in there similarly, but it's tough at that point. I mean, Jordan Addison, I don't really have those guys significantly apart, just personally. Factoring in some of the context into why Quentin Johnston's production, for example, wasn't as elite as we would expect for a top 2 or 3 wide receiver in the class. So I would say that I was fine, honestly, with how things were playing out up until the quarterbacks, and we spent enough time on them. So the rest of the class is interesting, and as you guys said, there's a lot of talent in this class, but I really am not so sure that we should be putting it in the same conversation as 2017. And not that we guaranteed or anything that this is the same type of talent, especially at the running back position. But I think that some of these profiles have faded a little bit compared to when we were talking about this, let's say 1 year ago, 2 years ago in Devy. Tank Bigsby never really took that step forward from his true freshman season. You could say all the context around why he didn't do so, but he still hasn't really lived up to, a superstar type running back. Unfortunately, Zach Evans, for maybe it's just health, maybe he's just trying to preserve himself for the NFL, I believe is a very efficient running back. Is he going to be a true star in the NFL? I don't know. Is he going to get drafted like that even? I'm not sure. And I love the depth of the class. You mentioned Izzy Abanikanda. He went at 209 in your poll, and I think that's a very good spot to put him. But again, some of these running backs, Devin Achane, they could be good at the NFL level. Are they going to be elite? These guys who keep producing RB1 type seasons for our fantasy squads when they're 27, when they're 28 years old. I don't know if I'm going that far or expecting that.
I don't know. If you ask Travis about Devin Chain, I think he might tell you differently. I know he loves him some Chain there. But why don't we go ahead and get into the tier 7 here? It's a pretty big tier. Finally, one of the biggest tiers that we've had, or actually the biggest tier that we've had so far. 110, Kayshon Boutte, 111, Zach Evans, 112, Sean Tucker, 201, Zach Charbonnet, 202, Michael Mayer, 203 Josh Downs, and 204 Tank Bigsby. And then, getting into what Aaron was talking about with Bigsby, I feel like if you're drafting a player just because his name is Tank, you deserve everything that you get. So no, I'm just kidding. But Travis, how did you feel about this tier? Did it kind of go with how you felt about it, or did anybody shock you here?
Yeah, I kind of felt like, hey, depending draft order, this tier could be just molded and shaped in any direction. Like, any of these names could lead this group or bring up the rear in this group, depending on how the draft goes. And so I think that made sense to me. Like, Kayshon Boutte had a crazy, awesome, hyped ceiling, and we loved him as a prospect in Devy leagues for quite some time. And that's not really past tense. We still kind of do. Maybe some questions because he's coming off of not one but 2 ankle surgeries last offseason, and he didn't really look like the same Kayshon Boutte that we had come to love and adore and project as a first-round pick. But he could still get back to that. So I think that there's there's a lot of upside there. And so it made sense that he would kind of lead this group. I was maybe surprised that there weren't, more wide receivers that kind of crept up into this conversation. I thought that people had kind of come around on like Jalen Hyatt and Zay Flowers a bit more. But it was clear that Kayshon Boutte and Josh Downs were the only ones that had any hope of going in this range, given how the results were going throughout the polls. And so really fun to see. And if people are curious on like, how did this tier of 7 players, how are they all close? Well, I actually kind of would have an ongoing poll of 4 options. And then I would actually have while we're waiting type poll, like who should be next type poll to figure out and populate who would be involved next. And so you could kind of see tier breaks coming. You could see like, oh, there's 3 players that are all really close that could all be considered to be added. And then when they're added, it's all still very close with everyone in that conversation. So it just was funny to see all 7 of these players, Kayshon Boutte, Zach Evans, Sean Tucker, Zach Charbonnet, Michael Mayer, Josh Downs, Tank Bigsby. I'm sure you could find someone that likes one of these guys over the other in every single case.
Yeah, actually, I really don't disagree with the tier. I think it's pretty good. It kind of makes me wonder if that. I mean, I guess it kind of seems silly that obviously it is a tier break in this poll, but it kind of makes me think if this is the not elite, but like the very good tier break. Thank you, dear. My wife just brought me a drink. I wonder if it's kind of that like very good tier break, and then after that, maybe it starts kind of falling off. And like I said, I'm not very big into Tank Bigsby, but maybe I'd swap a couple players here, like a Kendre Miller or somebody like that. But kind of like that, and then we have Andrew Cooper, as I know him, says tight ends with the same first name and last name don't miss. So we know Michael Mayer is going to hit at this point.
We should have known Kyle Pitts was a lie then. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, it all makes sense now. But,
yeah. Hard-hitting analysis.
It's very, very much so. But yeah, I can't really hate on the tier. Like I said, I'm not the biggest Tank fan. I don't love. I'm actually a little bit lower on Mayer than most. I'm a little higher on Kincaid. I don't know how you feel about that, Travis. But other than that, like I think this is pretty much how it's going to go, I would say, or at least close to how it's going to go in your rookie drafts. And that's what's making me want all these early seconds that, people might not be valuing quite the same. And yet you can still get a Josh Downs at 203. Like that's insane to me. I love some Josh Downs.
Yeah, I definitely too is what I really enjoy Downs quite a bit, and metrics profile wise, like he's really, really fantastic. Yes, he's just quote unquote just a slot probably at the next level. I think he can play against maybe not a super long outside corner too, but he had a super high slot percentage, but very good. But Michael Mayer though, man, like when you put all his metrics side by side and compare them to the entire class, which is what I've done a lot this offseason and prep for draft season at Mojo, I'm like, dang, dude, I love conditional formatting, right? And so like Mayer's just like all green, all the way across. I was like, there's not one thing that he's not like one of the best at in terms of like his metric type profile. Like if you want to talk about like, oh, like when did he, break out? When did he have at least 15% of his receiving offense? Oh, his true freshman season. Okay. When did he, was he like really efficient with his volume? Yeah, he was. He had like 2.39 yards per team pass attempt, which is, by the way, almost a full half yard better than any other tight end in this class in any of their years that they were a receiver. And that's a super stupid, sticky metric, by the way, yards per team pass attempt. His yards per route run, incredible. And then like he took up about 37% of Notre Dame's offense in his peak year. And by the way, that would be good for a receiver. Like that's like the threshold we use for receivers is 30% that we want to see. And he was at 37. Like a good breakout year for tight end production in college is 15%. And he more than doubled that. Like, and he did it twice. And so it's just or like really 3 years, like we're just incredible. So, man, yes, he's going to run 4.7, but okay. So he's Zach Ertz. That's fine.
Yeah, he's so well-rounded, and I agree with a lot of what you said. And is there anything particular, John, that concerns you with Michael Mayer. And I know that, yes, he wasn't in this offense that was just super prolific. He wasn't going to be this Brock Bowers type of producer at the tight end position. And, that's just part of the situation he was in.
I didn't mean to make it out to where I don't like him.
Yeah.
It's more that I really do like Dalton Kincaid, and I'm not even saying I have him over Mayer. But if Mayer's going to go at 202, I'd much rather take a Kendre Miller. Aaron knows how much I love Kendre. I'd much rather take a Zay Flowers, somebody like that, than take Michael Mayer, and I can still get Dalton Kincaid a little bit later. So I definitely do not hate some Michael Mayer by any means, but I don't love 202. I really don't.
Yeah, it's hard to pull the trigger on the first tight end in most classes, right? Like it feels weird because like you typically like at least 2 or 3 other options. Like there's always like, but I really like Mark Andrews. Like can I wait on him? And sometimes it works out. Not often like the Mark Andrews worked out, but this class looks fun at least through like tight end 5. So I mean I like Darnell Washington again. Speaking of like aliens, man, that guy is something else. He could play like every offensive line, every defensive line, and tight end position. And then Kincaid is, I mean, he's fun. He's got a fun story too, like going to UC San Diego, having like no offers, like a 0-star recruit. Like he only played 1 year of high school football. And then now he, is up there in every number that you want to talk about in terms of tight end production. At Utah, he's a really fun story, and he might not be capped out because he only started playing football in 2017. So yeah, I like him too.
All right, so we already talked about a couple of players from the tier 8 here, but we have 205 Devin Chain, 206 Kendre Miller, 207 Zay Flowers, and 208 Jalen Hyatt. Once again, I'm hearing what you're saying here, Travis. Like it seems pretty on point. I'm not hating on it at all. At least to this point, we have some very good players. I already expressed my love for Kendre Miller and Zay Flowers. But why don't you tell us about your boy Devin Chain there? Because I'm pretty sure you're a little higher on him than 205.
Yeah, Devin Chain is funny because every conversation will begin and end with his weight, because his list weight's like 185 at Texas A&M. So people are like, oh, he's he probably plays at 180 or whatever. Yeah, but he's like a really incredible sprinter. Like he has a sub 10.2 second 100 meter on his resume. And now that his kind of track career is wrapping up, he can actually add some weight now that he's not gonna, he's not trying to get back to track weight and compete like at a near Olympic levels. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ran like a 4.25 ish, like right on the line of the record when it comes to the combine, because like half of it is just about getting the right start, and he's literally like a near Olympic sprinter. So he's got that rep, the practices and reps to do really well at the combine. But he also really translates on the field too. So he's got just world renowned at this point, like elite level speed, like the elite for the NFL. Like he's probably faster. I know it seems blasphemous to admit that anyone would be faster, but he's probably from a measured speed perspective faster than Tyreek Hill. And so it's really fun. Yes, he's going to be a little bit small, but he's got great contact balance for being that small and can be a receiving back. And so I just really like A-Chain and pretty much everything in his game. If he was 15 pounds heavier, he would be just, oh yeah, so he's Chris McCaffrey. Okay, cool. Like that would be the consensus. There we go. Some wisdom from Toronto, Dave.
He also says he didn't know that he was that fast. Yes, that is definitely like the biggest part of his game. His elite Olympic level speed is very obvious. And like Travis said, it's really just the size. And whereas when people talk about Josh Downs is too small, this player is too small, Xavier Worthy is too small, I don't care about wide receivers. Like I think if no one else has done it, I think Devontae Smith has kind of proven that like wide receiver BMI and all that kind of stuff just doesn't matter. Like a wide receiver can just be really good. And, we see that with the running back, man, it's so tough. I do love me some Devin Chain, but it's so tough to get beyond that because I feel like even if we decide we don't care about running back BMI, running back weight, size, whatever. The NFL is not there yet, and they're going to still put him in a role where, yeah, he could score you some points. It might not be consistent though, or it might just be kind of hit or miss or whatever. And so it's hard for me to have him too much higher than this, but I really don't mind him here at the 205. Do you where you obviously love the player? Like, where would you feel comfortable drafting him in this great class as much as you love him?
I think he belongs in the tier above this, for sure. If he actually does get the capital that I think he could, which is actually round 2. Because I mean, like, we just saw James Cook. I mean, his last name's Cook and he's related to Dalvin, so that helps. But he's literally better at everything. Like, there's not a single thing that he's worse than James Cook at. And Cook actually came in 199 at the combine with water weight, but he's clearly not actually that big. And so, if A-Chain profiles almost similar to that range, I mean, he's a little bit shorter, but he wouldn't have to even get up to 195, I think, to have the same BMI as James Cook. And we just saw Cook be really efficient in some small sample touches this year. But we'll see, because I mean, like, Austin Eckler at like his Western Colorado, actually it wasn't even Western Colorado's pro day. He had to go to somebody else's pro day. But at his pro day, I believe he was 185. But then he added, 15 plus pounds, and he's a little bit bigger because he's been in a pro weight room for a little while. And so, yeah, I think A-Chain could get into that range of like the 201 to 203. And I mean, McCaffrey's not huge either. Like, he's around that range. So at least he was as a prospect. So I think the league's just admitting, hey, look, if we just get him in space, get him in space, and if he can glance off contact, he could be one of the most efficient players and playmakers in the league.
Yeah, Aaron and I were both pretty high on him going into, or actually like most of last year. And then we kind of fell off this off season where we maybe expected him to take like a 5-pound jump or something like that. And it just didn't happen, and I really think that's all. There's a lot of players that I can sit here and nitpick to hell. He doesn't do this metric. He doesn't hit this. He doesn't hit that. It's really just the size for A-Chain. So, like, I love the player, but it really just is with him. And but like, I'm also the one fighting the good fight, like I said, with a Josh Downs or an Xavier Worthy, like we're a different position, but man, I'm just over people hating on players for the size. So maybe I need to, take my own pill here and take my own medicine and just go ahead and say, no, Devin Chain, stud running back, I don't care.
Yes. And I mean, I tend to agree with the undersized thing. If you're undersized, you need to be an elite type of receiving back. I don't know. Maybe A-Chain can get there, though, honestly. He has shown that he's functional there. But as John said, as far as wide receivers go, yes, I think the small wide receivers are just becoming more and more viable for these NFL teams. They don't care that Devonta Smith is skinny. They don't care that Wan'Dale Robinson is super short. Josh Downs, Zay Flowers. So Zay Flowers is another guy in this tier. He went at 207. Very viable wide receivers. And the reason that Rondale didn't work out, well, maybe there's a couple reasons, right? Because he had some injuries, of course, that affected his college career. But if we're looking at some of these guys and how they're deployed on the football field, I mean, they're being utilized as deep threats. These guys aren't just little pop pass slot guys, how they're being utilized, at least in college. In the NFL, yeah, maybe they'll be slot weapons, but be able to be utilized all over the field. So I've actually had Zay Flowers rising a little bit to my rankings, where he's getting pretty close to Josh Downs. It's just that Josh Downs did everything that Zay Flowers has, but at a younger age. Josh Downs was just better younger, and he is still younger, and he's a little bit banged up this year if anybody's concerned about Josh Downs' production this season. But both very interesting guys at a smaller size.
Agreed.
Actually,
that just like Zay.
That just made me think. Oh, go ahead, Trav. I'm sorry.
No, you go, man. I was just saying I like Zay.
I told you we were going to go off on tangents. It's just kind of what we do here. But with talking about all the different metrics and everything that you look at and all that, I tend to lean on, not to say that I'm a big proponent of never look at one metric. Like one metric's never going to give you the full story on a player or anything like that. So I'm not saying this is the end all be all by any means, but I really try to get simple with one of my favorite metrics that I look at for wide receivers. And the reason why this popped in my head was because of Rondell Moore, Aaron talking about Rondell Moore, is yards per reception. And like we get into all this crazy stuff with yards per team pass attempt, yards per route run, and like all this other kind of stuff. But yards per reception seems to tell us so much of a story. And with, I'm not saying once again it's the end all be all, or that just because a guy has a low yards per reception that like that's the that he can't possibly be good. But man, Rondell had like a 12.4 yards per reception for his something around there. I might be wrong. But it just always stuck out to me that people were talking about how explosive this guy is, how amazing this guy is as a receiver. And yet he just didn't show it. I get that Purdue isn't the best offense out there and all that kind of stuff, but yet you had David Bell, who's not considered an explosive wide receiver, putting up a higher yards per reception. And so when I see that kind of stuff, it just makes me think like, okay, this guy's not quite the receiver that other people are saying that he is. And I don't get into film analysis. I don't get any. So like, I'm not sitting there watching the guy. I'm just going off of the numbers and I'm seeing somebody like that. Now, that's only one example, but but do you get into those simple kind of stats and analysis as well? Or do you really try to stick with the mainstream ones, if you will?
Yeah, I don't really pay attention too much to yards per reception, but mainly because like that kind of thing will actually show up in a lot of the other efficiency metrics too. Like he didn't have a crazy high peak to his yards per team pass mark because that speaks to the efficiency. If you have a really low yards per reception, it would take quite a lot of volume to have a ton of yards per team pass attempt. So it's like it is volume, but it also is efficiency. So that's why that metric is one of the stickiest, just practically and anecdotally speaking. But yeah, his average depth of target, even as a true freshman, wasn't even like 6 yards downfield. So it was going to be tough for him to have a very, very explosive looking profile. But his like yak per reception was actually really, really wild. It was like 8 yards of like yak per reception, which is typically like 95th percentile or above, which it isn't super sticky in predicting fantasy points specifically, but it is in predicting capital. There's a lot of correlation there. Like some other top guys, like we've already mentioned tonight, Devontae Smith was really high every single year for the most part at yak per reception. A lot of deeper ADOT guys won't have a bunch of high yak per reception, which is why it doesn't necessarily work like super strong linearly, but there is signal when you do some other nerdier things. So, but yeah. That was probably a longer answer than you were looking for. But yeah, anyway.
It was perfect, man.
Yeah.
Well, I can take us through the rest of the guys. I mean, I guess we didn't really get a chance to talk about Kendre Miller, Jalen Hyatt. I absolutely think that they belong in this range or maybe even earlier. You could make an argument for either one. For John and I, probably Kendre Miller, even more so than Jalen Hyatt. Any last words there? Or should I get going with the final 4 selections of the second round?
Hyatt's just fun. I mean, because he's like crazy efficient. I mean, he basically does one thing really well. And so if a team uses that really well at the next level, he's probably going to be really fun and splashy. Like he could be like what we wanted Will Fuller to be if a team just like goes, hey, you're absurd when it comes to two-way goes out of the slot. We should probably just do that. Because that's what he did at Tennessee. And so if he can burn some people with his speed, I'm not saying he's going to be a 99th percentile efficiency kind of guy, like he was at times or against Alabama. But yeah, he definitely should get some early capital. He should be in the first round mix.
Yeah.
At least consideration.
Absolutely. He's certainly an interesting player with just how explosive he is, though he's limited. So we'll see if he can kind of take that next step and really develop his game. Yeah. So as far as these last guys go, 209, Izzy Abanikanda, running back. 210, Rashee Rice, wide receiver. 211, Marvin Mims, wide receiver. And then rounding out the second round was 212, Hendon Hooker, quarterback, who unfortunately has now torn his ACL. So he's not really going to be participating in a whole lot of things this spring going into the summer. Unfortunately, that's why he's falling. So if we had kind of hopes that he would be up where Anthony Richardson or Will Levis I mean, those have quickly disappeared since that injury, very unfortunately for him. But any thoughts on this last bit of guys here?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Benekenda is going to be 20 for most of his rookie season. So he did really well in a few big games. I think he's going to test pretty well at the combine. And so I think he could rise higher than this if somebody does. So I do like him. Analytically, he's going to be, a check mark for the most part. Rice is kind of funny because he's like, I don't think he's going to be super elite in one attribute, and I'm not sure even he's going to gain a bunch of steam this week at the combine or at the Senior Bowl because he's basically like if you put him into most like production metrics and like weight and some other filters to give you comps, like he's going to return guys like Brandon LaFell and Zay Jones, like long-term contributor but not elite upside play, and so that doesn't typically interest fantasy folks, and that's pretty much who he is. Like he's a good football player, but so I think it made sense that he was at back end of round 2, despite being mocked as like a round 2 wide receiver. But Mims is funny because he was like a Debbie darling for a couple of years because he came in as like a top 50 recruit or so in his class. Never peaked analytically speaking, but he was always super efficient. Like that, I think it was 2 years ago. Like the entire like stat chart of every wide receiver was like, speaking of yards per reception, it was like 9.9, like 10.4, 11.1 at the best. And then all of a sudden, Marvin Mims is 22 yards per reception. It's like, what? How is that possible? Because he's just really explosive and wins downfield, and it is fun. I think he gets day 2 capital, and it made sense that he's in this range. He might go in round 3 though of rookie drafts because he lost some steam to his hype. I think Hendon Hooker could go even later than this, but it's an absolute shame that that's the case because if he was a year younger and didn't have an ACL, there's no reason he wouldn't be in the conversation to be the QB1 in this class, let alone QB 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think it's to the point where I get obviously Hendon Hooker's not going to be a first round draft capital kind of player. It's just not going to happen with the ACL tear, especially. Maybe he could have worked his way there, had he been 100% healthy. We've seen crazier stuff happen. I get there's a lot of arguments with the system, QB, and all that kind of stuff with Hooker. But man, at the end of the second, taking a guy like that and knowing that it's probably going to take a year. But what are you expecting with Anthony Richardson and Will Levis? Like at the very least, you're expecting it to take a year, but you're not taking him at 108. You're taking him at 212, or like you said, possibly even later. I kind of love taking Hendon Hooker around this range and just hoping for the best. Like I said, I don't think it's going to pay too much in dividends in year 1, but man, he showed a lot. Like he showed arm strength. He showed athleticism. He showed, the ability to command an offense and all that kind of stuff. Everything that I kind of look for in a QB. Now, it took him 5 years to do it, or at least 4, and then he built on it from, in his 5th year. And then you add an ACL tear. But man, I kind of love that pick. And then Marvin Mims, if I can get Marvin Mims at 211, I'm going to be a very happy camper. I get that he probably had bigger hype, more hype, going into Debbie drafts and all that kind of stuff. But that athleticism and everything, once again, it's kind of like an arbitrage Quentin Johnston. Not the size, obviously, but that athleticism, that burst, that speed that you're looking for. If you're talking, but I think he's actually a better receiver than Quentin Johnston. Now, that's not saying that I'm taking him above Quentin Johnston or anything like that per se, but I think he actually, is better route runner, better, actual wide receiver than Quentin Johnston, whereas Johnston might have more elite talent or whatever you want to call it, that kind of thing, speed, I should say. So I love getting a Marvin Mims at 211, and Aaron knows that my Abonaconda love changed quickly once I figured out that he was not a senior. For some reason, I thought he was a senior this year, and then I figured out after Aaron graciously told me that he was a junior, and then I all of a sudden fell in love with the Abonaconda. So the only player I really disagree with here is Rashee Rice. I want nothing to do with them.
Yeah, Well, like I said, it's not that I really want to take him a bunch. He's a good football player. Like he's gonna stick. There's this upside's not sexy. I don't know if you were or Aaron. Are you higher on Rice?
Not necessarily higher. So he was a very pivotal player in my C2C championship run, and yeah, so I definitely have I guess some connection or some tie there where I want him to succeed. But if I'm being realistic, no, I think you laid out very well his probable upside, his most likely outcome being a longtime NFL guy who's just not really a stud. He's not going to give us an edge on our fantasy teams, most likely. And he doesn't necessarily have this elite athleticism. It took him so long at SMU to really stand out, unfortunately. But he is a fun player just for NFL purposes, maybe not quite as fun. So I would like to see him be replaced maybe by Dalton Kincaid, another guy. I have 100% rostership of him in C2C, and I'm a huge fan, always have been. But well, I should say since this last year, I was a big believer. But there's other guys who are certainly interesting in this spot. I think Roshan Johnson. I know we didn't cover anything Senior Bowl related, but that's going on this week. He looked good day one. He's just this built guy who didn't get an opportunity because, guess who he was behind? Well, first of all, he's a quarterback coming into college, converted to running back, and then he's behind Bijan Robinson. I mean, if anybody's going to block you, I'm not going to hold that against Roshan Johnson. Let's just say that. So I don't know if either of you have thoughts on maybe guys who could slot into the second round or Rashee Rice instead of Rashee Rice or otherwise.
Yeah, well, first, Coop says that Rice was like 2 inches shorter than he said he was. I'm guessing he must have measured in at the Senior Bowl
Today, yeah.
And was a little shorter. So I don't necessarily care about height and weight with wide receivers, so that doesn't necessarily bother me. But I'm sure it'll bother other people, and maybe he'll drop because of that. And if he doesn't do like Travis was saying, if he doesn't go crazy at the Senior Bowl and we see some of these other wide receivers kind of stand out, then maybe he will fall a little bit. And then that's a good transition into the rest of the players that did not actually receive like technical votes, but received votes for like who should be available in these polls. And so, basically like 301 through 312 or whatever is Deuce Vaughn, Chase Brown, Darnell Washington, Kenny McIntosh, Cedric Tillman, Dalton Kincaid, Roshan Johnson, Raheem Jarrett, Eric Gray, Nathaniel Dell, Tank Dell, Luke Musgrave, and Tucker Kraft. So we have a couple tight ends there, actually 3 tight ends, and everybody. But I know Aaron just talked about Roshan Johnson and who was the other one? Oh, Dalton Kincaid. That he would move up there. Is there anybody from that list that Travis, that you would rather have in place of Rice there?
Yeah, so I think Tank Dell might work his way up. I know he's really slight in weight, but he just plays at a different speed, man. He's already just looked really good at the Senior Bowl this week because, of course, he would. Back-to-back 1,300 plus yard seasons with at least a dozen touchdowns for Houston, and all the adjusted metrics are going to be check for him, and he's going to be one of the fastest wide receivers at the combine. I think he's somebody that probably rises up pretty soon, and so I think I'm sure the Mojo folks are going to actually be probably putting something on social about him, just talking about they've got plans with some social stuff on like the guys that are getting a bunch of buzz, and it seems like Dell is in that range, and it just makes sense. He just is the perfect kind of day 2 speedster with a solid profile. So I think he probably passes up a lot of these guys and passes up Rashee Rice eventually in terms of just consensus. If he doesn't, it's just because of the weight thing again, because he's really skinny. But besides that, like Cedric Tillman, I would have liked him 10 years ago. But I don't now. He's just he doesn't really separate necessarily, and he's a little bit bigger, but he doesn't really do anything well except of dominate at the catch point, which is cool. But that's what a lot of guys do. So yeah, I don't know. There's not a bunch of that I would like obviously move up. If Deuce Vaughn was bigger, I'd move him up Kenny McIntosh was fun, like he was this year, but I'm not sure I can move him up into that range, like second round. But Dell definitely should be higher.
And Tajay Spears, Tulane running back.
He's getting the hype. I know that much. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but he's definitely getting hyped. I think if I was going to move somebody up, it would be Kincaid. I guess I've professed my love for Dalton Kincaid at this point through the pod. I don't know. I'm not a big Tank Dell fan, but although I do respect the speed, because I mean he has a huge he is the Devin Chain of wide receivers, if you will. But yeah, honestly, that's great. I think you were. I know from talking to you in the group chats that you were very pleased with the way that the polls worked out this year. To where I think it was the first year, if I remember correctly, that you truly got kind of like a third round out of it, even though necessarily they didn't necessarily vote on them, but they kind of did, that kind of thing. So how'd you feel about the wrap up in this third round, if you will?
Yeah, I tried something different. I almost did like a little tournament of polls. It was it's a little hard to follow, but I was like, look, I'm going to have like 2 groups of 4 that are going to be they're going to move up into the next group of 4 to just be in consideration for the last pick, because I wanted to see who really should be up there. And that made it really clear who the next 12 were. It really outlined it pretty easily. So I was really happy to see some deeper results than I typically have ever tried to find. It was kind of like a battle royale. It was like Super Smash Brothers, like tournament mode. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. One more note though, Hendon Hooker. You mentioned it took him a long time to break out. I will say he has 4 years. When you look at his advanced passing profile, 4 years of at least the 68th percentile or better. Even when he was at Virginia Tech, he had 2 years of 68th percentile, 80th percentile, playing with a trash offensive system and no skill position players to mention. And then 2 consecutive seasons well above the 90th percentile in scheme adjusted pass efficiency. And then he also is a fantastic runner. So it's like, wow. I wish he was healthy, because man, he could be fantastic.
Yeah. But that also means that you're going to get him at a 212 or possibly later, rather than possibly 112 or wherever. So I mean, this could be a blessing in disguise. Although I would much rather him be just healthy than all of this. Especially because it's going to affect the draft capital, and we do know at that point draft capital can affect their ability to get on the field and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, unless you're Brock Purdy.
Unless you're Brock Purdy and you're just that damn good. But, all right, I think I already know the answer to this question, but if you had to pick one, who is the sleeper in this draft class for you? It doesn't, I mean, obviously it can't be a guy in the top 12, but, beyond that, if you had to pick one.
Oh, man. I think it would be somebody who could come from the mid-range to, hey, wow, he's threatening Bijan Robinson for running back 1 a few years from now. That would be Tank Bigsby. It might not happen, but I swear I'm not an Auburn homer here. My family roots for Auburn, but actually I hate what Auburn did. Over the last 3 years, it's been a dumpster fire. It's been horrible, but it hasn't been because of Tank. Tank was like a top 50 player in his class coming in, and he was the only player that I thought at the time could actually pass up Bijan Robinson, mainly because Zach Evans was also in that class. I was kind of a head case throughout his recruiting journey, so I was like, I'm going to put Tank and Bijan 1-2. Bijan barely with an edge there, but he just has 3 really good seasons, not elite seasons, but really good seasons, like 3 seasons of at least 55% of the backfield's offense. And really didn't top out because, the coaching was a mess. The offensive line was a mess. The quarterback play was inconsistent. And it was in the SEC. It was still productive every single year against SEC competition. So he has all the traits. He has good enough production, and he does everything well. And he has the pedigree. He has everything going for him that I like to see. Check, check, check. It's just not like perfection. And so I think 2.04 was the absolute floor. that I saw coming, and that's what happened. I don't think that there's any chance that he goes later than this in an actual rookie draft once the capital happens. So I think he could be a first round consensus type player in most rookie drafts, and then actually be even better than that.
Interesting. So you really do lend credence to the offense just really held him back.
Yeah, just very, very much so. He was one of those guys that looks good when you look at the yards after contact per attempt numbers, because he was basically always getting hit. And in terms of like eluded or missed tackles forced, depending on like which stat provider you're looking at and what they call the stat, he was elite. And so his elusiveness rating is very high. Bijan's was stupid. Bigsby was like second in the stupid good rating, you know. So I like Bigsby to exceed the current expectation more than anyone.
Toronto Dave actually brings up kind of I mean, you're talking about the eluding tackles and everything. He's talking about Tank feels like Monty, like David Montgomery. Do you feel like that's a quality comp? I mean, maybe you would say Tank has a little bit more speed. I don't know, but what you would say, but just talking about like the eluding tackles and things of that nature, like that's kind of what Montgomery was all about. Whereas he didn't have a lot of elite other things.
Mm-hmm.
That was his big thing.
Yeah, David Montgomery had the benefit of being in a dreadfully weak running back class, right? So if he was in this group, he wouldn't even be ranked. Like if he was just same everything coming out this year, he wouldn't be at the 2.04. Montgomery would be later. Like he would be in the Kendra Miller kind of tier by consensus anyway, just as a prospect. So I think I like that in terms of limited by some offensive things, and he wasn't always efficient. But yeah, I think I'd prefer Bigsby, just his prospects.
And I think that's fair. He's more athletic than Monty too. He's gonna be a little bit better, at least burst wise. We don't know about the top end speed. Tank Bigsby being like a 4.6 guy coming out of high school, but honestly, I could see him going in the 4.5s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. I'm a known Tank Bigsby hater, but it very well could just be because of the offense. It's also more so that people love him so much that I get a little contrarian when it comes to it, because it's more so that I love these other running backs. Like we've talked about how quality this class is. I love these other running backs so much more that I'm just not willing to take him in the first. And I've heard so many people taking him in the first, and that's when it becomes a problem for me. I really won't. I said it before. Like I really won't argue with even Tank being in that 204 range or anything like that. I've said it before. I love me some Kendra Miller. I gotta have Kendra before Tank. We can start having other conversations after that, but I gotta have Kendra up there. Real quick, how do you feel about Kendra? You in agreement here? Because I think Aaron and I are pretty much in lockstep here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's still the streak's still going, but I'm not. I don't think that there's been a TCU running back that's actually scored a fantasy point since LaDainian Tomlinson retired. It's just funny. Like there hasn't been any, like there's been some almost, like some people like really like Shewa Olonilua for a little bit, but he didn't even pan out either. Like he was on the Cowboys, I think, for a hot second. And I don't think he actually did a live game stat. So it's just funny. Like it's weird how they just have not hit. And we thought, oh, Zach Evans is going to fix that. Nope, transferred. And so, but Kendra Miller was productive, sharing the backfield even at times with Zach Evans. So yeah, I definitely like him. He's just like another one of those players, good at everything, great at not necessarily anything, but definitely profiles just overall as like a late day 2 pick. And so I think if that happens, then he's going to be in the mix for early opportunity. And so that's fun. I think I can't rank him above like a Tank Bigsby. I don't have him in like my top 7, I think even, but he's like right like RBs. I mean, right outside that tier looking in.
Sure. All right, so we've talked quite a bit here, and I really do appreciate your time and everything. It's been a lot of fun. Aaron, when I said that we were having you on and everything, maybe it wasn't necessarily because of you. I don't think that when he thinks of Travis May that he thinks of hot takes, but he just mentioned that he kind of wanted us to have a hot take on this pod. So if you had to come up with a hot take, and we try to stay realistic, so we're not going crazy, we're not just saying things just to say things or anything like that. But if you had to have a hot take for the 2023 Debbie season, where would or what would you come up with here? Because I think there's a lot of different ways you can go. We have actually, I think my lights are turning on off. My lights are automated here. So, but what would be your hot take for the 2023 Debbie season?
As in like future outcomes, or like something that
It could be just something that happens this Debbie season, or or like a player that people really love that all of a sudden they don't love nearly as much because of this season, like something to that effect.
I think there will be 7 future first round quarterbacks that come out of the 2023 true freshman recruiting class this year. 7.
Wow,
That doesn't
there's
sound
definitely some hype.
Yeah,
I
love.
I love it.
Yeah,
that doesn't
I
sound
was,
like super hot to most people like that don't follow recruiting, but like that's a lot.
No, so I mean, think about it. Like we're talking about the 2023 class has basically 2 quarterbacks that we like love, and then you have a couple others that are maybe they have something. So if you're saying 7, I mean that's just a substantial difference there.
I
I like
like it.
I like a lot of them, and I'm not saying that it'll all be in the same draft, but 5 of them, 4 of them will come out and early declare, and then 3 of them will smash in year 4 or 5 or 17 if if the eligibility keeps going as crazy as it has been. And then eventually be first round picks. Like I really like Dante Moore, UCLA. Like he's probably my QB1 at this point. Malachi Nelson I like a lot, and he's a Lincoln Riley quarterback. Come on, automatic first. Arch Manning has the last name Manning, automatic first. So and so then you got Nico Iamaleava, the $8 million man at Tennessee, going to a really quarterback friendly scheme, and then Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma, who might actually be better than all of them. And then you have another tier of guys that are like in that almost good enough that are going into schools that typically get quarterbacks drafted, like Christopher Vizina going to Clemson. You got Holstein and Lonergan going to Alabama. And then you have like this really fun tier of guys, even beyond that could be first round picks. And JJ Cole at Iowa State, Jaden Rashada, wherever he goes, like we're going to find out where he goes. I don't think he's there yet, but he's got like that really prolific 7v7 experience that has typically translated to future NFL success. And then like even like oh man, Avery Johnson is like the best quarterback recruit Kansas State's ever gotten, and Austin Navasad that ended up choosing, I guess, Oregon over Baylor. Like all these guys are making good decisions to put them in a spot to compete for early opportunity or year 2 opportunity, and then to just smash. And so it could be an underestimation when it's all said and done. This is the best quarterback group of recruits we've ever seen, and it's not close.
Wow, what a way to end the pod there. And I didn't prepare a hot take myself, but it was gonna actually be, if I did say something, it was gonna be like the quarterback play in the next couple of years from the young guys in college football. It's gonna be crazy. Some of the names that we see rise up and break out, because the 2025 class, this last year's freshman class, there's some very interesting guys from that year as well. So yeah, fun times ahead for quarterbacks and Devi.
I agree. That is pretty exciting, and I will say that just looking, I don't get into nearly as much of the recruit rankings as Aaron and obviously Travis do, but I'm getting into it now for this season, and the QBs look very good, and they went to a lot of good spots. Like there's a lot of spots that needed QBs that got QBs, and we can't always say that. Sometimes it's like, oh well, this top QB went to Ohio State and he's behind 3 other QBs, or that kind of thing. Like Drew Allar went to Penn State, but guess what? Penn State's always going to play Sean Clifford if he's there. Like it's just some of those things. But yet we actually got some good landing spots here. I had me. I at this point last year. I couldn't go a pod without talking about Tank Bigsby. This year, I can't go a pod without talking about Luther Burden. I had one a hot take for Luther Burden and Malik Neighbors, but because we're sticking to the QBs here, I'm going to go ahead and say that Drake May will be the QB1 over Caleb Williams when it's all said and done next season, because Drake May is the stud and Caleb Williams is very, very good, but he is not Drake May. That is going to be my hot take with a little bit of realism into it.
That's spicy.
It is spicy, and a lot of people hate it. I understand that, but I love me some Drake May, so I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. And Toronto Dave says, "Who could have seen that coming from me?" Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm the hot take guy.
Nobody.
Nobody. Absolutely. All right. Well, Travis, this has been a lot of fun. I think we gained a lot of info here, a lot of knowledge. It was really cool to delve into your rookie poll here, and try to figure out what we liked, what we hated, what we loved, and all that kind of good stuff in between. But why don't you go ahead and tell us about where we can find you, with Mojo and everything else, and what else you have going on, maybe like an insight into the future of Mojo.
Sure. Yeah, the list of places where you find me is much shorter these days. At one point, I was doing like Titans coverage, Falcons coverage, like some SB Nation stuff, Fantasy Pros, Debbie column, and and then RotoViz. It was way too much. Dynasty League football, it was way too much. And now I'm like, nope. Mojo, that's it. So I don't actually really do content for them. I think a lot of people thought I was like, oh, he's going to go do content for them. I'm like, no, it's much nerdier than that. Like it's a bunch of analytical modeling and stuff. And I don't really do written content for them. I do still do the College to Kenton podcast, took a brief hiatus from that as Stefan and I have both been in transitions lately. But yeah, we're about to get back into it with draft season, talking some top prospects. So College to Kenton podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then, if you want to see some stats that I probably pitched to somebody, you can check out all the awesome written work that Mojo actually has on their site. Like they've got some really fun content and some great writers there. So yeah, that's basically where you can find me, and at FF_Travis M on Twitter. Glad to answer as many DMs as I can. Sometimes I miss them. Sometimes I look at them and I'm like changing my kid's diaper and then I forget to respond, like dad stuff. And so I just forget sometimes. So sorry about that. But yeah, I'm love having conversations with anybody about football in general. So yeah.
That's awesome. You've been a great guest. I really appreciate you coming on once again. Aaron lost his headphones, so he's not going to be a part of the conversation anymore. But I appreciate everything. I appreciate you guys listening. And, we'll be back as soon as possible. With the Debbie Devotional, it's whenever we can. We definitely try to stick to a routine, but it doesn't always work out. But we'll be back as soon as possible. Until then, we're cashing out. See you guys.